Welcome to Heart and Hand Extra, the second weekly flagship show from Heart and Hand Rangers podcast. My name's David Edgar, and joining me this week to discuss what's been going on at Ibrox and also preview this weekend's trip to Kilmarnock is former RST chairman Stephen Smith.
Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I am grand, mate. I'm very good, very busy these days with our subscription service. I'll just get the plug in for that just now. If you enjoy these shows, you can get more of it. Over 1,500 people have already signed up. It's just $1.99 per month or $3.99 per month, and we haven't had any complaints so far. Usually 2 shows a day, but if you're happy just to listen to Flagship, we appreciate that, and thank you for sticking with us. So I'm busy, but a lot happening in the world of Rangers, although mainly on the speculation front. But we'll start off with something concrete, Stephen. We're coming off a universally agreed shocking performance at home to St Johnstone last week, and we are back on the road with a trip to Kilmarnock, a Kilmarnock side who I would say are improved from the one we faced earlier this season. However, their form has fluctuated. They've gone up and down under Steve Clarke, but I would think that this is not going to be a stroll in the park for Rangers. However, it would be fair to suggest that this Rangers team is a significantly better side away from home for some reason than it is at Ibrox.
Oh, I can't figure out why we're losing games at Ibrox the way we are, David. I mean, that performance against St Johnstone was as bad as I've seen in the last 2.5 years. Actually, I can't. Whether it be under McCoy's or Warburton or Kashinya, it was as bad and as insipid, completely spineless. I was really disappointed. And particularly bear in mind we got a really good start. Morelos is on the board early and everybody's lifted, and then before there's 15 minutes in the clock, we've let a second goal in, and then after that we literally never looked like winning that game. No, created very little in the second half. It was appalling. That was really I couldn't figure out why.
Something you touched on there, Stephen, I think is interesting, which is that it's not only are we winning games away from home and not doing so at home, it's the manner of the performances. Now, you could say that we didn't play particularly well at Easter Road, and you'd be right. Most people agreed it was a bit of a smash and grab, but we fought. We showed character and we showed backbone, and we were playing a good team who were right up for it, and the determination of the players got them through that match. You then contrast that with a match last week where, okay, we still didn't play particularly well, but there was none of that fight, none of that spirit, none of that togetherness, none of that passion that we witnessed on Wednesday. And for me, that's the most staggering thing at the moment, is not so much just the results, because although they are freakish, you can analyse and look at the reasons for them. But it's like two different teams when Rangers play at home and when Rangers play away. And some people have said, is it Ibrox, is it the pressure? And all of those things are valid, but all the intangibles I don't think can mount up and explain away why a team will, if you like, have that mental strength and desire on a Wednesday and then be absolutely anemic and have none of that at all to display on a Saturday. Yeah.
I mean, it's inexplicable that we can go to Easter Road, Pittodrie, pick up 6 points, beat Aberdeen at Ibrox. So the last run of fixtures, we've effectively taken 9 points from our most difficult, other than our friends across the city, our most difficult fixtures, and then we have squandered them in results against St Johnstone and Hamilton, eminently winnable games at home. We've literally frittered all that good work away on inexplicably bad results when we've got players who are playing in front of 47, 48, 49,000 fans. If they can't get motivated at Ibrox and show that same effort and application, David, they really ought to question why they're playing professional football. It's the old maxim that says you need to at least match your opponents in terms of their effort and their application and their drive and their physical competitiveness, and then your superior skill ought to win you the game. And that's what Rangers teams have traditionally done in the past, and that's what this team, and actually we haven't seen at Ibrox for a good number of years now, are failing to do, and what we absolutely need to do. So I hope the next manager, whoever he is, picks that up, because that's clearly a deficiency in this current squad.
Who knows, Stephen, he may not have been born yet. So
no, I might not be born. No, and our grandchildren might not yet.
Yeah,
be born.
we can start programming that into him in a sort of universal soldier way from childhood. We'll start in calculating him with the staunch, but. Yeah, it has been, and last week I thought was just so unforgivable, simply because if you look at the reasons, I would say reasons rather than excuses, because we do, as supporters, I think, look to analyse and look to say, okay, why is this happening? And one of the reasons, and I think it was logical and I think it was arguable, is that, well, at home they're a little intimidated, and if something goes wrong for them, the atmosphere is such that it can become very negative very quickly, and the players shrink under that. Right, fair enough, get that, totally agree. Definitely the case versus Hamilton when Rangers were up against it, that they didn't have the ability to come back from that, and you could see them visibly shrinking on the park. Okay, cool. We took the lead against St Johnstone. The crowd was in a good mood. It's mid-December, everybody was up for it. We were coming off the back of a series of really, really good wins, and you're not going to get a better set of circumstances than that.
No.
You're just not. And that, therefore, that reason, or if you want to call it that excuse, that's okay. Maybe I would say reason, you would say excuse. That's okay. It's just semantics. But if that was a valid, it went out the window on Saturday, and that one, there was no hiding place. That one was entirely down to the team that took the field.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's the fact that it's inexplicable, David. I mean, you're looking for a bit of form, and we've won 4 games in the bounce, including some very, very tricky fixtures there. And so you're looking for the players in that environment, because you're taught that if you string a few runs together, then that builds its own level of confidence and self-belief, and you start to kind of believe in yourself, and you don't play the game in your head as much. You just do it. You play the natural pass rather than thinking, what will happen if I won't try the tricky pass or try and take this guy on, because if I lose it I'm going to get shouted at. And as you say, we took the lead, so there are there's no explanation. I mean, what Alston's goal was a decent goal, don't get me wrong, a good goal from St Johnstone, but after that we're still level. And we're still putting a score on the board, so we should still be winning that game. And then in that second half in particular, I can't think, other than Cranshaw's free kick at the tail end of it, creating a serious chance.
Windas's header, there was a header. It wasn't
if we were hitting the bar, the post, and their keeper had the game of his life.
Keeper had an easy match.
Poor.
Yeah, we were. Keeper did have an easy match, and so like I say, we move on, and we didn't have a midweek fixture. So we're off to Kilmarnock this weekend. As I said at the start, Kilmarnock, of course, did manage to get a new manager. Well done to them, because it's not as easy as maybe you or I had first thought to do that. And Steve Clarke, who of course has a wealth of experience and has achieved I'm sure what the Kilmarnock board asked him, which is make them more durable, make them tougher to beat. He's picked up some excellent results along the way, picked up a few bad defeats, which I think we would all admit is probably due to the level of player that he had, but there's no doubt he's made a difference in his short time at Kilmarnock, and they'll be resolute, they'll be up for it, and they'll be fancying their chances on Saturday. It's a sellout at Rugby Park, huge away support, I'm going myself, and it should be an interesting game. And if Rangers, the problem is to sit here and try and analyse and try and look at what might happen, is that we just don't know what Rangers team are going to turn up. No.
I mean, Rugby Park's been traditionally for us, David, a reasonable venue, in the sense that, as you say, we get both ends of the ground, and there's not normally outnumber the home. So it kind of feels like a home stroke away fixture. It's quite odd, but it's a venue we've played well at before. I agree with you. Clark's improved them, and we'll have them. We know one thing is that he will have them motivated for this game. Absolutely no question about that. I just hope. I hope we play well. I hope we get a result for obvious reasons, and I hope and the petty and bitter side of me comes out, that we give Broadfoot, if he plays, absolute dog's abuse for what he did at Ibrox the last time he came, because he's a disgrace.
He is, and as you mentioned there, the last time we played was the crazy and now infamous 1-1 draw that saw Pedro get his jotters the next day. Seems like a while ago now, does it?
It's like a lifetime ago. You and I were sat in that stand looking at each other thinking, what the hell is going on?
Well, the thing is, Stephen, that Since it's been so long that, for instance, since Rangers fired their manager, if you remember right at the start, Alan Pardew was linked, and I have here, I've written it down. Since he left, Alan Pardew was linked, and he's gone on to manage in this period West Ham, Southampton, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, and he's now at West Brom. That's how long it's been. Or like, maybe not literally, but it fucking feels like it.
And all those other candidates we were considering at the time, David Moyes, Sam Allardyce, they've all gotten secure employment at clubs whose budget is considerably larger than Rangers. And I just remember the people saying, I don't know if I want Allardyce and the style of football he plays. Like, it was ever realistic we'd get the former England manager when there was a host of English Premier League clubs circling around them. It's just, people need to live in the real world. It's not 1998 anymore, David. We're in a very, very different market, and we need to be thinking very carefully about who our next manager / coach is.
Well, we'll come to that in a minute. Let's focus on the game first of all. So we're going up now. We don't really seem to have an awful lot of options to change. I thought the formation was wrong last week. I don't like the 4-3-3. I don't think Rangers are very good at it. I think historically we're not very good at it for some reason, but I think currently we certainly are. It shunted Josh Windass out left, where he's not effective, and we've got a whole body of evidence that says Josh Windass isn't particularly effective in the left, whereas he'd been playing, I think, really well and looking a real danger and a confident player in that sort of just off the striker role. So I'd like to see us try and fashion something along that. I don't think the three defensive midfielders worked. And I just think that the whole game plan was wrong. Now, Ryan Jack finishes his suspension against Kilmarnock, so that's going to necessitate a change. And I don't really know what Graham Murray has to play with here. I have sympathy here, Stephen, because I'm saying we need to change from last week, but it's not like he can go, yeah, you're right, I'm going to look to player X, Y and Z. There are a lot of players on that side that you could do with refreshing, and maybe not an awful lot of options to come in and play.
Yeah, I mean, let's deal with the midfield one first, David. I mean, if I can't see that Ryan Jack, Ross McCrory and Jason Holt playing in the same midfield is remotely tenable. It's not only very defensive, but you're not going to get any creativity there, or very limited creativity if that's your midfield three. I think we have to think very carefully about how we do that. But as you say, we're kind of restricted with options. Personally, I'd like to see Ryan Hardy getting a run, but I hear what you say. If you don't play Windass up along with Morelos or in that number 10 role, then you reduce his effectiveness by about 50%. I'm not really sure. Candace, as you know, I'm a fan of his, but I think the last two games particularly has been very, very poor. Clearly needs to be dropped. We're kind of struggling for options, and one of the disappointing things from the game, the previous game there, is that Nico Cranshaw, when he came on, did very, very little indeed to affect that game. Even in a limited spell where his fitness oughtn't to have been an issue. So he didn't do enough to either change the game or to put himself in contention for a place at Rugby Park. So, I'm kind of scunnered a wee bit about what we do, because, I think it's great having Jack back. I think he's been excellent, arguably our player of the year so far. But we need a number of contributions from other people. Maybe think about playing three at the back and trying to push Tavernier. Sorry,
well done.
Let me pronounce that correctly. Tavernier and Jack up, as kind of wingers, and don't bother with Candace, and maybe find a way to put Jack, McCrory and Holt in that midfield with Morelos and Hardy up front, or Herrera even. But we're limited for options, and that tells you exactly everything you need to know about where the club is at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that. I think that the three is something to look at for the reasons that you mentioned there. And last week was a case in point that Declan John and James Tavernier they have qualities, and it would be really, really unfair and wrong to say that they don't, right? I mean, they're frustrating at times, I agree. But defensively, they are, I would say, very poor in the case of Declan John. I just don't think it's his natural game. I think James Tavernier has improved defensively this season, but is still erratic and is still capable of matches where he just is horrible defensively, and last week was a case in point.
Yep.
So for me, if you have a situation where you have a group of centre-halves, and we do, it's one of the positions in the park that we're well covered for. We can talk about the quality later, but we have guys who are all regularly playing and have game time this season. You can play the three and you can shove those two forward in a position which is going to give them additional cover defensively and utilise their strength, i.e. going forward. And it does necessitate a change, but I think sometimes you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. It might not be the ideal situation if you sit down and you have that Rangers squad and everybody's fit and you can select from everybody, but we don't. And I think that given the pool of players that we have at the moment, as you say, it's something that we need to consider, because otherwise we're just going to get the same results. Kilmarnock have got some pacey wingers. The young lad Jordan Jones, who is reputedly a target for Rangers, he's very quick. He is still learning his trade, and people are right when they mention his delivery and his final ball at times can be lacking. And yes, that's absolutely correct. At the moment he is very much in that place, but I think that it would be something I would be looking at, because obviously Graham Murty adapted the system last week and he's done it a few times, so he is somebody who thinks that way, and I will give him that. Tactically I think he is pretty switched on. People have mentioned about Graham Murty's inability to change the game from the bench, and they are correct, except one major card I'd like to play in his defence, which is, you look at that bench, what the hell is he supposed to do? So I would be looking at that, I really would.
Aye. I think we know what Graham Murty is, and up until recently he wasn't considered to be a kind of top line manager, and he is doing, I would agree with you, David, in the circumstances he's in, which is extremely difficult under all sorts of pressure and scrutiny. I think he's done as well, if not better, than we could have expected him to do. The fact that Rangers are still, we're still competitive, third in the league. Our goal difference is plus 14. There are lots of positives for what we're doing, and I would have far more faith if he's in charge when we go to Mordor on the 30th of December than I would, if Kashinya had been there, because I would just have been how many are we going to lose by. Whereas with Murty, I have at least a bit of faith that we're not going to squander that game playing a daft formation or playing players who are clearly not capable of the role that they're being assigned to. So, I think fair play to him, and he deserves, however this ends, he deserves the thanks and the respect of the majority of the Rangers support for stepping in and doing it. I think a more than admirable job in the circumstances with the hand of cards that he's given. You can only play the hand of cards you've got, David, and if you don't deal him a very good hand, then what can he do?
The only thing I would criticise him for last week is Pena not being in the 18, because I think that when you are so devoid of options, you have to take one, even the ones who you can't rely on, and you can't rely on Pena. There are days he's anonymous, and scores a goal, and there are days that he's putting together a lot of good touches, but he's never going to be somebody that stands out for a whole 90 minutes because it's just not his game. However, last week when you looked at that bench, I would far rather have had him to come on than not have him. And that's the only thing I would criticise him for. But having gone with that bench, what was he expected to do? He brought Kranjčar on. I think Kranjčar looks completely shot at the moment. I think you need for Kranjčar to be effective for us in any way. I think he's got to achieve a level of fitness that, for various reasons, and I'm not knocking him, I actually know for a fact that Kranjčar hired his own personal trainer to try and get fitter, both when he first arrived at Rangers and after his injury. So I'm not in any way criticising Nico Kranjčar. I just don't know if he can physically do it. I don't think it's attitude. I just don't know if maybe there are too many miles on the clock for him. And last week when he came on, I thought he didn't look like a footballer. The other change he made was he brought on Herrera, who for whatever reason just cannot make an impression at the moment. And you'd mentioned
he brought Kranjčar on about the hour mark, 61, 62 minutes or something, and so he had a good half hour to change that game around, and we were only a goal behind at that point. So if you're the sort of player that Nico Kranjčar used to be, you would eminently have been able to affect that game and change it in that half hour, and there was no sign of that at all. I had a look at that bench as well. The others on the bench were Lee Hodson, Ryan Hardy, Jonas, David Bates and Liam Kelly. That was their substitute lineup. So of those, you would say Cranchar is the one most likely to be able to change a game. I'd like to see Ryan Hardy getting a run out, I have to say, for all sorts of reasons.
Well, Stephen, I want to bring that up then, because you mentioned that earlier. Now, Ryan Hardy has been linked this week with a move to QPR, who are not spending what they used to spend. He's out of contract at the end of the season, and QPR want to pick him up for the development squad, their under-23s, which is understandable. Now, Ryan Hardy, I don't think has made much of an impression at all. Hasn't done brilliantly when he's been out on loan. However, his track record in the under 20s and Rangers development squad is exceptional. But what his strength, if you like, is his pace and his ability to run in behind. And at Ibrox, especially when we're chasing a game, which is when he's got on, then he's not going to get the opportunity to do that. So there is the argument that says, well, away from home would be the time to play him. Now, the counter to that is obviously Alfredo Morelos has got 3 in 3 games, but I thought he looked knackered last week, and a good point was made to us that you have to remember now that Morelos is coming up for playing a whole season, in that he was playing for Helsinki, and because of the way the Finnish football calendar works, he basically played, I think it was 20 games, and then he's arrived at Ibrox and he's played ever since. And last week I thought he was devoid of the sharpness and the aggression and all the stuff that we mark with him. So there is the argument that says, he's been scoring goals, but he's knackered. And rather than having him start and Hardy come off the bench, is it worth swapping them round and saying to Alfredo, you come on in the last half an hour, he'll run their legs off them early, and to say to Ryan Hardy, rather than you coming on when we're chasing it and they've got everybody sitting in the edge of their 6-yard box and you've no space to work in, let's try and see if you can stay on the edge offside, get on the end of things. Is it worth maybe looking at that? Because I think we would all agree that the idea of starting Herrera is a non-starter.
No, not on the basis of how he performed in that last game, David. Absolutely not. I mean, it would be a brave decision.
It would, because 3 goals in 3 games. That's a fact. You can't argue with that.
No. I mean, it's possible that Murty would do that, but I think he's more of a conservative manager than I think many give him credit for. I take your point that I don't think a winter break can come soon enough for Morelos. I'll be very pleased, and I'm sure his body will be, and his mind, I guess, because you're getting a bit fatigued, and there's a hell of a lot of pressure on him as a kind of spearhead of that Rangers attack, particularly more so now that Miller's out for an extended period. So Murty now has got the options and the ability, and Hardy, to be honest, is the only other consideration that hasn't really factored into how we attack and how Rangers line up, in terms of their kind of striking positions. And I'd very much like to see him getting a run. And why not against Kilmarnock? Because it would, it gives us another option. We need to think about the games coming up ahead, particularly a trip to Castle Doom. So, I'd like to see him getting at least an hour, or if not, and he's got Morelos on, substitute him and give him at least half an hour again. Give him a run out and see how he goes, because we're never going to know whether he's going to be a Rangers player, David, unless we give him an opportunity to show it. The odd 5-10 minutes here, there, any player will tell you can do very, very little as a substitute unless you land very, very lucky, or you're playing a team that's knocking the door down in search of a goal when it's all one-way traffic. Those are the only circumstances where you can make that kind of impact. Yeah. That was why I was disappointed about Cranchar, at the weekend, because, to be honest, he ought to be changing and winning games, taking games like that by the scruff of the neck, and there was no sign of it. So, I think we've got some selection challenges coming up at Rugby Park and going further forward. So I hope the squad gets improved in the January transfer window, because it certainly needs it.
Yeah, it does, and I think you're right there about finding out if a guy can cut it. But as you say, it would be a brave decision, because it's a gamble in that if it works, great, you're a genius, but if it doesn't, then you're going to be criticised. Whereas I don't think you will be criticised if you start Morelos, because he's a first team player, he's our best goal scorer by a distance, and he is scoring goals at the moment. So it would be a brave decision. But again, we keep coming back to it's not like there's a hell of a lot of options available to Graham Murray. No. So we'll be interested. But I think you could do it as well with the justification that we've got 3 games in a week. And I think you could say, well, you know, we wanted to rest Alfredo for the upcoming game. I think you can maybe justify it in that regard, but it's Rangers. If we don't if we don't win a game, it's a disaster, as last week proved, and that'll never change regardless of who the manager is. Now, who the manager may be is still up for debate. And one of the key things that happened this week, we broke it down on the Patreon service. There's an extended pod with myself and Alex Staff did, where we discussed this now. But I want to get your take on it. You know, my former RST colleague, our former RST chairman. And this week, a big talking point among the Rangers support was Club 1872 published the results of a meeting they had with Stuart Robertson and the answers to questions that they asked and that had been submitted by fans, and by more than just fans, by members of Club 1872, therefore investors and shareholders.
Indeed.
It drew a lot of criticism, it would be fair to say, because a lot of people felt that the tone of the answers was very dismissive, and that there was nothing particularly enlightening. The key one being, you know, the managerial cert. They said they don't want to say any more about the Derek McInnes situation, which is understandable. I wouldn't hold that against them. But the situation remains the same, that Graham Murty will be in charge until at least the 1st of January. Now, this is the biggest position at any football club. That's just a fact. We can talk about, you know, the level of importance. Clearly, a chairman can run your club into the ground. So, I mean, you could argue that that's a more important position. But from the fans' point of view, who's the manager? It's the key thing. It's what everybody talks about. It's what every conversation revolves around in football for football fans. And because you're living through it, you can sometimes, I think, get a little bit blasé to it, and, well, you know, it is what it is kind of thing.
Sure.
Stevie, we're coming up for 3 months. You know, it's 56 days since Rangers had a manager, and we don't have anything to tell you. There's nothing happening. There's no time scales, and it's as if, to me, the board thought that, well, we've said that Murty will be in charge to the 1st, was going to close all conversation on it. And I find that attitude at best very high-minded, and at worst incredibly dismissive.
Yeah, patronising and condescending are the words I would use, David. Politicians' answers was how I picked the tone of those responses to the Club 1872's questions, some of which I thought were excellent. For example, I mean, the one that stuck out for me, jumped out the page, was the concerns about the club's PR communication strategy, which I think to everybody outside the Ibrox boardroom is subject to valid and entirely reasonable criticism. So, for example, why are we employing Jim Traynor, a man who wrote a newspaper column basically saying it was okay for the Spanish police to assault Rangers fans because of some of the songs they were singing? You know, there's a man who's employed at Ibrox, and I think it's quite legitimate to ask that question. What's he providing? And we got a lot of there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you plebs don't know about. Shut up and let us get on with the job was basically a synopsis of that answer. And I thought, well, that's kind of symptomatic of it, because clearly Club 1872 have been trying to develop a decent relationship with Stuart Robinson. There's a support liaison officer who's meant to kind of smooth pour oil in troubled waters, and I don't see any evidence of a significantly better relationship between this board and any of the 3 previous ones, and that's a real concern to me, because the 3 previous ones were run by people who, and I'm trying to stay the right side of the law here, had no respect and no integrity, and were involved in some very highly questionable decisions, utterly, you know, crooks, bibs, all the rest of it. It's extremely problematic for me that we haven't gotten rid of them, improved that key relationship between the support and the board, you know, where they're seen as separate entities rather than we're all part of the same family. And we don't have to look very far in Glasgow to see how that relationship works when it does work. You manage dissent, you make sure that you only disagree about the things that are worth disagreeing about. You put up a united front. It appears that the board has the support's back and vice versa, and you keep people informed, because we're not customers, David. We're fans. There's a key difference, and I think that understanding of that difference appears to have been lost in the Ibrox boardroom now, and I'm very disappointed that that's the case, genuinely so, because I expected far, far more and far better from this board.
I'll defend the supporters liaison officer because his role is very much a customer service role. You know, although the title can be a bit misleading, his job is not to go into the board and say, you know, this is what the supporters are feeling. His job is to make sure that arrangements are made for fans to travel safely, etc., for supporters, clubs, all that kind of thing. So that position, he will not have influence in the boardroom. That's a direct relationship between fans, reps and the senior people at the club. Okay. Now, from my point of view, I spoke about this in our show, so to any of the subscribers that already know this, but I'll get your take on it. When we were at the trust, and I know that's the hoary old back in our day thing,
aye,
and it was different because, first of all, we didn't own 10% of the club like Club 1872 do. Secondly, it was an adversarial relationship. Mm-hmm. And we knew that.
Not by our choosing, incidentally. I think that needs to be said in terms of historical accuracy, David. We were looking for cooperation and partnership and involvement and engagement, and we kept getting the middle finger extended to us by various
But we
people,
knew that going in, Stevie.
Himself.
But we knew that going in. We didn't walk in and think that, you know, when we walked into that room, they were open that they didn't want us there. They wanted us to shut up and fuck off, and that they were meeting us under sufferance. And we had to fight for everything in terms of getting an audience, getting involved with them, getting attention. And we knew that. So there was at least that degree of honesty there, that nobody could be fooled that you know, our relationship with Murray and Bain was not one of, look lads, you know, we're glad you're here, we'll utilise you, we want your help. It was eventually, once we'd created enough noise and once we had enough support, that we were able to get a foot in the door, but always with the understanding that they wanted to shoot our foot off and slam the door. So you had that aspect of it going in. That doesn't exist here, or shouldn't exist here, because you have a board who came to power on the back of popular support, used that popular support, and made promises about things like accountability, transparency and involvement. I keep going back to this because I can't get my head around it, and maybe you can explain it to me. You're a cleverer man than I am. How can the fans own 10%, not have a director, and not have, at this point, any time frame for when it's going to happen? It baffles me.
No, I'm baffled, David. I mean, I think the answer that was put forward was basically, well, you haven't nominated a candidate to be director. Well, I mean, that would, you know, under any circumstances, that's something that should have been rectified within 5 minutes of receiving that as an email or however those answers were kind of disseminated.
Yeah, I'd have done it at the meeting. I said that to you. I would have, at that meeting, went, right, cool, we're nominating this guy.
Aye.
Yeah, right there and then. Right, good. Go on. The fobbing off.
With a short list of 3-4 candidates and said pick one of them.
Aye. Yeah. The fobbing off aspect is not the sign to me of a board who want to progress that quickly, because you don't come away with an answer like that. Oh, you haven't sent us anybody. What you say is like, you know, you haven't sent us anybody, get us a list by and we'll have, you know, so the board can't hide behind that and then still claim, oh, we're committed to it. You know, you're committed to it theoretically, and you're quite happy if it remains a theory. You're not committed to it in actuality. I think, though, and, you know, as I say, we tend to avoid criticising Club 1872 because, you know, we know it's a tough gig. We absolutely do. But sometimes you've got to go in and kick up fuck. Sometimes you've got to make a stink. Sometimes you've got to realise that what you want and what they want, while the overarching aim is the best for the club, the best way to achieve it that's felt by the fans may not be the best way to achieve it is felt by the directors, and it's your job to fight for what the fans want. And I keep coming back to this, Stevie. If I bought 10% of Rangers tomorrow, I guarantee you I would get a better, as an individual, I guarantee you I'd get a better response than what Club 1872 got. And I can guarantee you I would want a seat on the board. I can't understand why the chairman, and let's be honest, guy who runs the club, has 16%. and that somehow makes him untouchable, whereas 10% doesn't even get you a seat on the board, especially when you've not just got 10%, but you're the voice of thousands of activist Rangers supporters. I find it disrespectful. I find it unacceptable. And to be honest, I am a little disappointed that Club 1872 seem to be prepared to put up with this. And they may feel that it's, they don't want to rock the boat, that they have a good relationship with the club, and that they feel that in the long term it's better to just hold their wheeze just now and move to it later. And listen, I'll be the first to admit you were there, and you should have held me back a lot more. You were fucking as bad as me, but I'll admit that I liked her. That was when I was at my best. Point me in the direction of the people that we need to fight, and I'll go and fight. And I accept that wasn't always the best approach, and sometimes I was much too quick to reach for the pitchfork and the torch. But there are times when you need to go, right, do you know what, nah, this isn't good enough, and this is what's going to happen, and if it doesn't, then we're going to cause a lot of noise and hassle, and you make it something they can't fob you off. You make it a situation that they need to do what you want them to do. And Club 1872, for all the good work they do, and they do a hell of a lot of good work, they do a lot of work in the community, that's all going to get drowned out. Similarly with the board, with all the good stuff that the board are doing, and yes, they do good stuff, because of this managerial fuck up, none of it is going to be heard. If you can't get the things the fans care about correct, then I'm sorry, you can't ask them to care about other things, because they won't.
Okay. No, I mean, there's a lot there for me to get my teeth into, David, but I mean, one of the things is that core relationship I was referring to earlier on, where it's understood that football fans are not normal customers. You either go or you don't go. That's basically, you don't go, Arsenal aren't playing well today, I think I'll go and see how Spurs are playing. That's not the way it works. It's not Tesco or Asda or Morrison's. So my fear is that it's that kind of binary part of the relationship is understood. The board understand that Rangers fans have got nowhere else to do, but rather than reward and cherish and develop that, they're exploiting that and just saying, well, at the end of the day, we're selling a lot of season tickets, we've got an income stream coming in, and we don't really need to give these people the voice in the club that 10% shareholding merits, and that's a worry. They ought to do that. I'm not saying that's a panacea either, incidentally.
No, agreed.
Because you and I both know that elected office is not a popularity contest. If you want to be a popular individual, don't hold an elected office, whether you be a councillor, an MP, whatever it might be. You're not going to be popular. It's about representing your people and trying to exercise your judgment, and also to kind of align with the aims of your organisation. And one of the things that you and I always tried to do was to articulate the voice of the ordinary Rangers fan, and when we were having conversations with Murray and Bain and co, because we were ordinary Rangers fans.
Yeah, that was it. It wasn't difficult.
True to those roots. Yeah. But of course, the other thing, and I'm sure you've covered this in previous pods when you've been talking about the kind of Q&A about what we did in the trust, you were always conscious that if you're in meetings with Walter Smith or with David Murray, then you're in there as a fan, and that's the manager and the chairman of your football club, and you and I are both lifelong Rangers fans. There's a real danger that you get kind of caught up in that, and as you and I know, there were people involved in fan representation who fell into that particular trap. And I just hope that the Club 1872 people, who I wish all the success to in the world, can maintain a healthy relationship in that regard. But you're right, at the moment, the supporters' voice in this and our consideration is very much at the end of the queue. And for example, stuff about commercial confidentiality and, well, you don't need to know this and that kind of stuff, that is not going to, this is 2017, 24-hour news, and the 24-hour news cycle is contributing to this. So what we need to do is make sure that the people who pay the bills and who contribute and are the lifeblood of the football club are involved in and informed about the key decisions around the football club. That's just an absolute basic requirement these days. Nothing else is going to do that.
Here's why Rangers PR isn't fit for purpose at the moment, because it shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what the media world is in 2017. And yes, I'm going to say that to guys who've worked in media for 40, 50 years, because I'm right and they're wrong. And this is not me saying, well, look how clever I am. I am one of thousands and thousands of fans who understand this, because the world has changed. And maybe it's because I'm not in that bubble that I can see that. Here's why it's fundamentally flawed. Because Rangers' approach to it is, as mentioned in that, well, you don't see a lot of the good work he does. Great, fine, brilliant. That's part of his job. Correct, well done. Glad he's doing it well. Glad you're happy with it. Here, there's another big part. There's a 24-hour news cycle. There's social media. There's constant chatter. Constant, daily. There's daily podcasts. There's newspapers, there's phone-ins, even although we don't tend to think of that. There are Rangers fans that associate with that, right? All of that now is constant. There's Sky News on 24-hour loop. It's not like it was even 10, but certainly 20 years ago. And absolutely. If your thing is, we've kept a couple of dodgy stories out of the newspaper, great, that's 2/5 of your job. The rest of it is involving filling this information gap, because if you don't, other people will. And then things will start to spin out of your control. And you mentioned earlier another club in the city who control the narrative expertly. So, we can see through it, but it doesn't seem to bother their supporters. And at the end of the day, that's all they care about. And we don't even attempt it. And you see this with these answers this week, which don't in any way shape, control, or offer an alternative narrative. What they simply do are widen that information gap, into which people will pour more stuff. Some of which will be true, some of which will be bollocks, all of which will be poured over, discussed, analysed, and will lead to a situation where people form opinions which the club don't want them to form and can't then be changed from. And that's what's happening at Rangers at the moment. Their view, and we can't take anything other than this, because this is exactly what's happened. Their view is that we have said there won't be a manager announcement until the new year.
Yeah. Well, that's 10 days. That's in 10 days' time.
And they made the announcement, over 2 weeks ago. So their view was, well, we've said now, so that closes that discussion. No, it doesn't fucking close that discussion. All it does is allow people to have more space to make their own shit up. And I'll tell you the desperation levels that it's got to. Last night, I'm sitting, and Paul Clement, the news comes out, has been fired by Swansea City.
Yeah.
I think a few people had known it was coming. I think anyone who watches football had known his jacket was on a sugary peg, as we say up here. But straight away, Rangers fans going, Paul Clement, would you take him? Now, Paul Clement has never been discussed for the Rangers. The reason Rangers fans were saying it is we're so fucking desperate now that it's like, there's a manager. I've heard of him. Could we have him? And it's because we're desperate. And they have allowed this situation to grow to the stage now where names are going to be tossed in and tossed out. And the fact is, Rangers have allowed this situation to grow to such an extent that unless they pull out a home run, and it's a dodgy one to suggest that they will based on their track record, the fans are going to be disappointed. Because you said earlier the names that had been mentioned, Allardyce, but every name has been poured over to the point that unless you get a superstar, people are going to be disappointed, because you have allowed this information gap to grow so big that people are just filling it themselves now, and they will create their own narrative. And then when your narrative, or in fact your actuality, doesn't match, I mean, I've seen people say things like, I still think it's going to be Pulis, and that, great, if it's Pulis, fine. But if we come in now with somebody who is far less of a track record, that fan's going to be gutted, and that fan is going to start off with the opinion of, we've hired a diddy, because you allowed him in his mind to build up a picture. As I've said before, it's Schrodinger's manager at this point. At the moment, okay, we haven't hired anybody good, but we haven't hired anybody bad either, so I can still dream about manager X being given the job. And they just don't get that. You've got a PR guy who doesn't like social media, and that's cool. You don't have to like social media, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't mean you can ignore it. You can't uninvent it, and you can't say, I don't like it, therefore I'm refusing to deal with it. It exists. It's used by a huge percentage of your customer base. It's used by a huge percentage of your stakeholders. And if you're not going to participate in it, other people will, and they're going to drive on the story. And Rangers at the moment they look like they're indecisive because they're indecisive. They look like they don't know what's going on because, let's be honest, they don't really know what's going on, and in fact are proud of it in some cases. And the situation is chaotic and people can see through it.
Do you know, I was thinking about that, about the whole kind of paradigm we operate in now, David, and I've got I haven't bought a newspaper, and I don't think I'm atypical in this sense. I'm in my mid-50s, but I haven't bought a newspaper for, I don't know, easily 2 years, because I rely on and get my news from either television or from some online source, or that's where I get my content from. And I'm, you know, if I'm in my mid-50s, everybody younger than me, and by the way, I'm not a technical one of these gadget lovers, so I'm not an outlier in that regard. Anybody younger than me probably does the same, and as you know, in your printed media, thankfully, sales are falling off the cliff edge, and the sooner a good number of newspapers in this country are dead and buried, the better. But nature, there's a saying that's in media, it's in news and in politics, and it says nature abhors a vacuum. And I think what I've always taken that to mean is, if you don't fill the gap in the space with content, somebody else will. And that's exactly what's happened, because as you pointed out, we are nearly in getting on for a 3-month hiatus period where we not got a manager, and in the last period, if you aggregate it out, that there's been nearly 3 months of playing time, effectively, as the Americans would say, where we haven't had a full-time manager. And those are that. And this is the one thing I am very, very kind of strict about in any kind of walk of life: avoidable mistakes. People are always going to make mistakes, and that's fine, and they happen, and there's human error. But easily avoidable mistakes are the one bugbear I have. And you watch it on a football field where, you know, it's just, you know, somebody just doesn't close the cross down, and the cross comes in, and there's a goal, and it's you know, stopping it at its source. That kind of thing. That's really, really. That's a real bugbear of mine. So we've got, as you've pointed out, there's a hostile media. There's not all of it is hostile to Rangers, but there's a significant element that we know that is proactively anti-Rangers. We have very rarely put up a robust defence of some pretty Mickey Mouse stuff about accusations about that. So, for example, we're in a country where, in a Scottish Cup final, there were about 8,000 people on the pitch at Hampden. In a cup final we were involved in mass disorder and fighting caused by one set of supporters. But we let a media narrative develop, and we get dragged into that particular swamp when there were literally thousands of people committing criminal acts at Hampden Park when Rangers played Hibs, and Rangers fans ended up getting tarred with that brush. Utterly inexcusable and utterly avoidable. We need to develop that relationship. That's the other thing, and you pointed out that what our friends across the city do is they work in concert, and they develop solidarity and their sense of community. Siege mentality, the world's against us, everybody hates us, blah blah blah. We know what the tropes that they go to are, and we know how little there is to them, but they act as one, and they don't either let the fans hang out to dry when they're involved, and bear in mind how many times they've been done by UEFA, and they're still portrayed in a certain way in this media. Questions not asked. They've got, as you say, control of that narrative. I'm not saying we emulate that, but what you do is you look at what your enemies do, and you do the same. Yeah, you do. If they get good example, you match that, and you maybe do it better. And we're not. I don't see any signs of any of that kind of strategic thinking going on at Ibrox, and that's a huge problem for us, because we are a great Scottish institution. We have a great story to tell in terms of what's happened to the football club, and us keeping it going and getting back to a position where we get 48, 50,000 people at Ibrox every second week. I'm not hearing that in the media, and there's all sorts of reasons why that's not the case. But one of the main ones is that Rangers Football Club is not grasping the nettle and is not on the front foot in terms of PR.
And as you say, it's easily avoidable mistakes. It's the same ones over and over again, and it's because of a fundamental disconnect from what the situation is as opposed to what they deem the situation to be. And it's that lack of understanding that's causing the problem. And the problem for them is, even from the, never mind doing it because it's the right thing to do and the right way to do it. They should be doing it because in the interest of self-preservation. Because the longer this goes, the more they make these errors, the less and less credibility they have, and yeah, it's just damaging. But okay, doke, Stephen. Well, we'll wrap this up then. I'll just go through a few messages before, but just before we come to that, prediction for Saturday.
2-0 Rangers.
I think we'll win 3-1 on Saturday, and yes, there's not really any logical reason for it, but there's been no logical reason for any of Rangers' success this season. I just think that for some reason our players go out with a different mentality, and yeah, I fancy us to get the win on Saturday. Although of course with this Rangers team, any combination of results you could argue for and probably put forward a very valid case, but I'm going to go for 3-1 Rangers, so get your coupon on that. Okie doke folks, then just to let you know, because obviously we're coming to the Christmas period, this is our last flagship show before Christmas, so we'd like to thank every one of you for listening and making this our most successful year ever. We really appreciate that. There won't be a flagship show on Monday because it's Christmas Day, however we will be back next Thursday, and we'll take into account the Kilmarnock and the Motherwell matches, and we'll have an extended Heart and Hand extra next Thursday, and then to get back into the routine early in the new year. If you do want more content from us, well, we'll be available on our Patreon site. That's patreon.com/Heart and Hand. It's Patreon. You'll get daily shows up there, usually 2 a day, all different types of things, be they from historical shows. We had one today that launched called Supporter Stories, when a supporter told us his tale about the time he went on the official club flight to play PAOK Salonika, and some brilliant stories in that. Loads and loads of new shows, daily updates, that'll be happening all throughout the Christmas period. But as I say, in terms of the flagship show, we will be back next Thursday, and we'll cover the games that have taken place before that and preview our trip to fight the Orcs. Well, I think that's just about everything from me today. Just to remember, if you want to get in touch with us, then you can tweet me. I'm at IBroxRocks, or you can go to Facebook and you'll find us on there. Just search for Heart and Hand Rangers podcast, and we'll do our best to get back to as many people as possible. With that in mind, I'd like to thank our executive producers in London, Mr. Mike Lee and Mr. Paul Myers, and thank my guest today, Mr. Stephen Smith.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure as always, and I wish you, the rest of the podders and your listeners, a wonderful Christmas and a staunch 2018.
I would like to echo Stephen's wishes for a staunch 2018, and like I say, thank you all very, very much for sticking with us this year, for supporting us. The pod's growing exponentially this year, huge, our biggest year by far, and it's really went through the roof, and that's on top of the subscription site and everything else launching. Exciting times ahead for Heart and Hand in 2018, and thank you very, very much for being a part of it. My name's David Edgar. Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you all next week. Cheers, bye.